Listen, you sick, broke little woman, I have already taken care of the divorce papers. This house, everything in it, and the high-end SUV will be mine. When all this is over, I am going to marry my girlfriend. My husband yelled at me, announced our divorce, and kicked me out while I was severely ill. He took everything from me, thinking he had won it all. He believed he had achieved total victory. He was dead wrong. A few days later, he would be the one calling me in tears. Before the story begins, please let us know in the comments which American state you are watching this story from. Do not forget to leave a like and subscribe so the channel can continue to grow and bring you more interesting stories. Ava lay in the massive bed that felt ice cold, yet her entire body burned like fire. The thin nightgown she usually wore around the house was soaked with sweat at her temples. Her throat was bone-dry and aching. Every time she took a breath, she felt sharp pain. She had been bedridden for 2 days, completely defenseless. That morning, she had asked her husband, Ethan, to buy her some fever reducers and antibiotics, but it was already night, and Ethan had not returned. The large house was silent, far too silent. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock in the living room, as if counting down whatever patients she had left. Ava tried to reach for the glass of water on her nightstand, but her hands were trembling violently. The glass slipped from her fingers and crashed onto the thick rug, spilling what little water remained. Ava could do nothing but close her eyes and endure the despair. Ethan had changed over the past year. Ever since her husband was promoted to department director at his corporate firm, his attitude had become incredibly arrogant. He frequently came home late at night and blamed Ava for absolutely everything. The breaking point happened 3 months ago when Ava started coughing frequently and getting tired easily. Ethan never showed an ounce of compassion. On the contrary, he constantly called her his sickly wife. He seemed to have forgotten that Ava was the woman who had stood by his side back when they had nothing, back when they lived in a tiny, cramped rented apartment in Wicker Park. The sound of a car pulling into the front driveway broke the silence. Ava felt a wave of relief. Ethan was finally back. Surely, he had brought the medicine. Ava tried to sit up, resting her aching back against the headboard. She waited for Ethan to open the door and hand her the pills. The heavy front door slammed shut, followed by the sound of fast, heavy footsteps. They were not the footsteps of someone worried. They were the footsteps of someone furious. The bedroom door was thrown open violently, revealing Ethan standing tall in the doorway. He was still wearing his crisp, tailored dress shirt. His hair was perfectly styled, and his face was handsome, but the glare he shot at Ava was filled with pure hatred. He was not holding a Walgreens bag. Instead, he was holding a thick brown manila folder. Ethan, Ava said, her voice hoarse and weak, where is my medicine? My head is killing me, honey. I have a terrible fever. Ethan let out a laugh. It was a harsh, mocking, and painful sound. Medicine. I brought something much better than medicine. This is a cure for both of us. A cure that is going to fix my life, Ethan said. He walked over and tossed the brown folder onto the blanket covering Ava. She flinched, staring at the folder in utter confusion. What is this, honey? Open it, unless you want to die of curiosity, Ethan replied with a cold, cutting tone. Using whatever strength she had left, Ava grabbed the folder. Her trembling fingers struggled to open the envelope. She pulled out several sheets of paper. On the top line, she read the words, "Petition for divorce." Ava felt her world stop. She could not breathe. The burning heat of her fever vanished, replaced by an icy chill that froze her straight to the bone. She looked up at Ethan, searching her husband's eyes for even the slightest hint of hesitation or doubt. But the only thing she found was deep satisfaction. Divorce. Ava whispered in disbelief. Why are you so surprised? Ethan sneered. He sat on the edge of the bed, keeping a deliberate distance, as if Ava disgusted him. Listen, you sick, broke little woman, do you really think I want to spend the rest of my life taking care of a useless burden like you? I have already handled everything. I filed the divorce papers. Ethan stood up again and paced the room as if he were giving a corporate presentation. I am done. I am sick and tired of hearing you cough every single day. I am sick of seeing you lay in bed with zero energy. You are a burden. A heavy burden, dragging down my life. What did I do wrong? Ava tried to ask, but tears were already welling up in her eyes. Your crime is being poor. You cannot give me anything. Ethan pointed around the luxurious master bedroom. Look at all this. This massive house in Lincoln Park, all this expensive furniture, the luxury Porsche in the garage, it will all be mine. I am the one who worked my fingers to the bone for all this. Everything is in my name. Ava said nothing. Behind her tearful eyes, There was an emotion that Ethan could not quite read. Ethan took Ava's silence as a sign of absolute defeat. Are you listening to me? You are not getting a single dime, no asset division, no alimony, nothing. You brought absolutely nothing into this marriage, and you will take absolutely nothing when you leave. Then, Ethan delivered the words that shattered whatever was left of Ava's heart. When this is all finalized, he said, his face lighting up, I am going to marry my girlfriend, Isabella. She is so much healthier, so much more beautiful, and most importantly, she actually understands my status as a successful man. Unlike you. Ava squeezed her eyes shut. So there was another woman. The name was unfamiliar to her, but the agonizing pain was incredibly real. I do not want to see your face in this house tomorrow morning, Ethan added with pure cruelty. I am giving you until dawn. Get out of my house by tomorrow morning. Do not take anything except the cheap clothes currently on your sick body. Ethan stared down at Ava, who was now weeping silently. Hot tears streamed down her pale cheeks. Crying is not going to change a damn thing. The paperwork is already filed. The process will be fast. Ethan turned his back to her and adjusted his shirt collar. I am going to sleep at Isabella's penthouse in the Gold Coast tonight. I refuse to breathe the same air or sleep under the same roof as you. Tomorrow morning, I will send someone to make sure you are gone. Ava wanted to scream, she wanted to curse him, but all her energy was completely drained. She could only watch her husband's back disappear through the bedroom doorway. The bedroom door slammed shut. A moment later, the heavy thud of the front door echoed through the house. Seconds after that, the roar of Ethan's Porsche faded as he sped out of the driveway. Ava was entirely alone, severely ill, unexpectedly divorced, and evicted. She sobbed convulsively. The searing pain in her chest was far worse than the fever burning up her body. She cried for her destroyed marriage and the incredibly cruel betrayal. After weeping intensely for 15 minutes, Ava suddenly stopped. She gasped for air and wiped her tears away with a harsh swipe of her hand. Through the intense pain, something else emerged, something icy, hard, and deeply calculating. Her previously pale and defeated face hardened into a mask of pure resolve. She reached under her pillow. It was not the pillow she normally used, but an extra decorative one she always kept nearby. Her fingers brushed against a hard, sleek object. She pulled it out. It was a top-of-the-line, custom-encrypted smartphone, far more sophisticated than the cheap, old cell phone she usually kept visibly on her nightstand. That sleek phone was her only secret, an object Ethan had absolutely no idea even existed. The phone did not have a standard passcode. It unlocked instantly with her fingerprint. The screen lit up, displaying a minimalist white background. There were no social media apps, only highly encrypted, top-tier corporate applications. Ava opened the only contact saved on the device, listed under the name Director Olivia Hayes. She pressed the call button. Her heart was pounding heavily, not from the illness, but from the fiery rage rapidly building inside her. The call was answered on the very first ring. On the other end of the line, a calm, highly professional woman's voice spoke. Good evening, Miss Ava. You are calling quite late. Is everything all right? I was informed you were not feeling well. Ava took a deep breath, fighting to stabilize her trembling voice. Director Hayes, she said, her voice raspy but dripping with cold authority, contingency plan. Activate it. There was a brief moment of stunned silence on the other end. Then, Director Hayes's voice shifted into a state of absolute seriousness. Understood, ma'am. What happened? I was kicked out, Ava said. Ethan just handed me divorce papers. He thinks I am a useless, sickly, broke nobody. My God, the sheer audacity of Mr. Ethan. Director Hayes hissed. Director, I am in bad shape. My fever is dangerously high. I need a medical evacuation immediately. I do not want to go to a standard emergency room. Come to the house and get me. Bring the private VIP medical extraction team from Northwestern Memorial, but no sirens. Do it with total discretion. I do not want the neighbors knowing. Understood, ma'am. The VIP medical team will be at your location in 30 minutes. I will come pick you up myself. Can you hold on until then? Ava looked down at the divorce papers, resting on her blanket. With the last reserve of her physical strength, she crumpled the documents in her fist. I have to hold on, Director. The game has just begun. She ended the call. Her body was still shivering violently from the fever, but her eyes now gleamed with razor-sharp intensity in the dark bedroom. Ethan had just committed the single greatest mistake of his entire life. He had just thrown his wife out like garbage. What he did not know was that he had just evicted the sole owner and chairwoman of AC Enterprises, a massive global corporate empire with a net monthly profit of $1.5 million. Ava waited in a suffocating silence. Every tick of the wall clock sounded like a judge's gavel striking wood. She gripped her secret smartphone tightly. Her mind was a chaotic storm. She feared Ethan might suddenly return. She feared the medical team would be delayed. Her body aggressively alternated between freezing chills and a scorching heat. Exactly 25 minutes later, her phone vibrated silently. It was a text message from Director Hayes. "We have arrived. The front door is unlocked. The extraction team is coming in." Ava let out a deep sigh of relief. She had accurately predicted that Ethan, in his arrogant rage, would forget to lock the front door. That man was far too full of himself to think his nearly dying wife could possibly pose any threat or try to escape. Mustering every ounce of her willpower, Ava pushed the heavy blanket aside. Her bare feet touched the cold carpet. The room spun violently around her. She nearly collapsed, but she grabbed the heavy wooden bedpost to steady herself. She had to leave. With trembling hands, she grabbed a long, elegant trench coat hanging on the back of the door. She slipped it on. She absolutely refused to leave this house looking completely undignified. She would not allow Ethan to strip her of her basic dignity. The bedroom door opened without a sound. Ava flinched for a split second, but then she saw two paramedics dressed in dark, tactical-style medical uniforms. They were not wearing the typical bright white or flashy neon uniforms of standard hospital staff. They moved with absolute speed and total silence. Behind them stepped Director Hayes, a striking woman in her early 50s with a stern but deeply loyal expression, dressed impeccably in a high-end tailored suit. Her face immediately registered profound concern upon seeing Ava's terrible physical condition. "Miss Ava," Director Hayes whispered. "I am ready, Director," Ava replied, her voice barely a whisper. "Get Miss Ava onto the portable stretcher," Director Hayes ordered the medical team. The team immediately unfolded a sleek, lightweight tactical stretcher. They helped Ava lie down with the utmost care. "Ma'am, we are going to administer a rapid-action fever reducer intravenously so you are more comfortable during transport," one of the medical team members stated quietly. Ava simply nodded. She felt a tiny pinch in her arm, and seconds later, a soothing, cooling sensation began spreading through her veins. As they lifted her, Ava took one final look at the bedroom ceiling. The very room she had personally designed and decorated, the room that had been a silent witness to Ethan's cruel transformation. They carried her out of the bedroom and navigated through the sprawling, luxurious living room. Ava's gaze locked onto the massive framed wedding photograph hanging on the main wall. A picture of her and Ethan smiling happily. The Ethan from the past, the man she once knew, the man who used to be tender and caring. Now, that photograph felt like a sickening joke. "Leave everything behind. Do not take a single item from this place," Ava whispered. "Absolutely, ma'am. We do not need a single piece of garbage from this house," Director Hayes replied with ironclad firmness. They exited through the large double front doors. There was no loud, flashing ambulance parked in the front driveway. Instead, a massive, custom black Mercedes-Benz Sprinter van idled quietly, looking more like a presidential Secret Service escort vehicle than a medical unit. The sliding side door opened, revealing an interior that was a fully equipped, state-of-the-art VIP mobile emergency room. Meanwhile, inside a ridiculously expensive luxury penthouse in the Gold Coast, Chicago, Ethan was laughing hysterically. He poured a very expensive cocktail into a tall crystal glass and handed it to Isabella, a gorgeous young woman, wearing nothing but a sheer silk robe. "So, tomorrow morning, we are going to be the official owners of that massive mansion, honey?" Isabella asked, her voice dripping with seduction. "Absolutely. I kicked her out. That sickly, pathetic woman will not dare say a word. She has nothing to her name. Tomorrow, I am having a locksmith change every single lock on the property, and the day after that, we can start completely gutting and remodeling the master bedroom," Ethan said while pulling Isabella into his arms. "How exciting. Finally, all of this is going to be ours," Isabella squealed with delight. Ethan raised his expensive crystal glass high. "To our brand new life," he toasted. His cell phone sat on the marble kitchen island, securely switched to silent mode. He did not want to be interrupted by pathetic, begging phone calls from his sickly soon-to-be ex-wife. Inside the sleek medical vehicle gliding silently through the dark Chicago night, the medical staff immediately went to work on Ava. A senior doctor waiting inside the van swiftly checked the IV line. "Her core temperature is 104 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a severe systemic infection," but we are aggressively treating it now. We need to get her to the intensive care unit rapidly, the doctor reported. Director Hayes sat in a plush leather captain's chair right next to Ava's stretcher. She observed Ava's pale, exhausted face with deep worry. "Ma'am, you have to stay strong. We have the entire VIP presidential suite prepared at Northwestern Memorial." Ava slowly closed her eyes. The heavy dose of medication was finally starting to kick in, significantly reducing her intense dizziness. Her thoughts slowly drifted back to the past. 5 years ago, at the very beginning of this massive secret, Ethan had just been abruptly fired from his first corporate job. He fell into a deep depression that lasted for months. Ava, who was a simple housewife at the time, tried everything to comfort and support him. But Ethan became incredibly bitter and highly sensitive about money. To protect his fragile male ego, he strictly forbade Ava from getting a job. "Your job is to stay in this apartment. I am the man, I will make the money," he used to scream, despite being completely unemployed. But Ava, who secretly held a highly advanced degree in biochemistry and pharmacology from the University of Chicago, felt suffocated and frustrated. Her mind was constantly overflowing with brilliant ideas. In her spare time, trapped between mundane household chores, she began experimenting in their tiny kitchen. She was not cooking food, she was formulating high-end organic skincare serums using rare herbal extracts. She combined her advanced degree with ancient herbal remedies she had inherited from her grandmother. She completely drained her own meager personal savings to buy premium-grade raw materials. After several grueling months of trial and error, she successfully formulated a revolutionary anti-aging facial serum and a brightening cream with miraculous, visible effects. She tested the formulas on herself, and the results were absolutely staggering. Ethan, entirely consumed by his own job hunt and self-pity, paid zero attention to her. He just assumed his silly wife was playing around with mixing lotions in the kitchen to pass the time. Ava gathered her courage. She launched a very small, discreet online storefront. At first, she only sold to a few acquaintances, but the sheer quality of her products sparked a massive word-of-mouth explosion. Orders began skyrocketing exponentially. Right around that same time, Ethan finally landed a new corporate management position. The starting salary was quite impressive. Almost overnight, his arrogance returned in full force. He frequently saw Ava staying up until the early hours of the morning, furiously typing on her old, beat-up laptop, managing customer orders and logistics. "I provide the money for this house, and yet you are constantly glued to that stupid screen. It seems you have absolutely nothing productive to do with your life," Ethan yelled at her one night. Ava simply remained silent and took the abuse. She had just closed a bulk wholesale deal worth $30,000 that exact same night. The ultimate turning point happened when Ava attended a prestigious women's entrepreneurial summit in Chicago. She sneaked out to attend as a general audience member. Director Olivia Hayes was the keynote speaker. Director Hayes was a legendary former top executive at a massive multinational conglomerate who had taken early retirement. Ava gathered incredible courage to approach Director Hayes in the lobby after the event. She showed her the proprietary product samples and handed her a meticulously handwritten business proposal. Director Hayes was absolutely blown away by the formulations and Ava's raw genius. "This product is a complete game changer, Miss Ava. And your underlying business strategy is remarkably solid," Director Hayes had said that day. To cut a long story short, Director Hayes agreed to come on board, not just as a financial investor, but as an active managing partner. Director Hayes was bored with retirement and fully believed in Ava's massive vision. Together, they founded AC Enterprises, operating as ACE. Ava was the absolute majority owner and the brilliant mastermind behind every single product formulation. Director Hayes became the public-facing CEO, the ruthless corporate shield for the company. Ava only asked for one strict condition: her name must never publicly appear on any corporate documents or press releases. She desperately wanted to remain Ethan's ordinary, supportive wife. Ironically, using Director Hayes's massive network of corporate contacts behind the scenes, Ava secretly pulled strings to ensure Ethan succeeded at his new job, hoping that if he felt successful, he would become a loving husband again. But Ava was horribly wrong. The more corporate success Ethan tasted, the more incredibly arrogant and cruel he became. ACE, meanwhile, experienced explosive, unprecedented growth. From high-end skincare, they aggressively expanded into luxury fashion and lifestyle brands. The high-end clothing and luxury accessories, all personally designed and conceptualized by Ava, took the domestic and international markets by storm. New York, Paris, Shanghai, and even Tokyo. A net monthly profit of $1.5 million was a very conservative estimate. That number was strictly Ava's personal, liquid take-home income. Aside from the company's retained corporate earnings, which were tens of millions higher, Ava kept her vast wealth completely buried and hidden. She continued to live as a simple, incredibly frugal housewife. Even when Ethan arrogantly demanded they buy the massive luxury estate in Lincoln Park and a brand new Porsche, he had to take out a massive corporate loan from Bank of America to afford it. Ethan constantly bragged that he easily secured the multi-million-dollar loan solely because of his stellar corporate performance. What Ethan did not know was that his corporate loan, which had dangerously teetered on the brink of total default a year ago, had been secretly bought out in full by a private equity investment firm. And that specific investment firm was a direct subsidiary of Ace, meaning Ava. The luxury mansion and the Porsche he bragged about constantly, which were put up as the collateral for that massive loan, legally did not belong to Bank of America anymore. They belonged entirely to Ace, which meant they belonged to Ava. Ava slowly opened her eyes. The luxury medical van was already pulling into the heavily guarded VIP entrance of the hospital. "Director," Ava called out. Her voice was still physically weak, but her gaze was as sharp and cold as forged steel. "Yes, Miss Ava." Director Hayes immediately leaned in closer. Ethan kept the house and the luxury car. He boldly claimed they were all his, that everything was in his name. Director Hayes offered a very slight, incredibly dangerous smile. "He seems to have forgotten, ma'am. He forgot who paid off his toxic corporate loan to Bank of America a year ago when his side business was moments away from declaring total bankruptcy," Ava continued. "He forgot that the absolute collateral for that specific loan is that very house and that very Porsche he brags about every single day. And he most certainly does not know," Director Hayes smoothly added, "that the private equity firm that bought his entire massive debt portfolio from the bank is AC Enterprises." There was a brief moment of silence, and the doctor and nurse inside the van professionally pretended they were deaf to this highly classified corporate conversation. "Director Hayes," Ava said, "initiate the total asset recovery and foreclosure procedure immediately." "When should the legal team strike, ma'am?" Ava stared blankly at the blurry streetlights flashing past the tinted window. "He kicked me out tonight. He thinks that tomorrow morning, I will be a pathetic, homeless beggar on the street. I want to let him genuinely enjoy his grand victory with that mistress of his. Give him exactly 3 days to celebrate his fake victory." Director Hayes gave a firm nod. 3 days. "We will consider it the absolute final free rent he will ever get from us. After exactly 3 days, our legal strike team will move in. On the dawn of the 3rd day, we will ruthlessly recover every single asset that rightfully belongs to you, ma'am." "Good." Ava closed her eyes once again. "Now, focus entirely on curing me. I need to be perfectly healthy and standing tall so I can watch his arrogant face completely shatter." The medical van came to a smooth stop inside a secure, private underground lobby. A team of elite medical specialists was already waiting. Ava was swiftly transferred to the presidential treatment suite. Miles away, Ethan was sleeping soundly with Isabella wrapped in his arms, dreaming happily about his beautiful new life, completely oblivious to the fact that his real life would violently end in exactly 3 days. The victory was far too sweet for Ethan. He woke up in Isabella's ridiculously expensive penthouse. The bright morning sun poured through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, bathing the bedroom in golden light. Isabella was still sound asleep beside him, her arms wrapped tightly around his chest. Ethan looked at her beautiful, flawless face and smiled with deep satisfaction. He had finally done it. He had permanently cut the dead weight out of his life. That sickly, pathetic woman. Ava. He happily imagined that right at this moment. Ava was probably sobbing on a filthy bench at a Greyhound bus station, desperately trying to figure out how to get back to her parents' rundown house. Ethan let out a dark chuckle. She was no longer his problem. His brilliant, wealthy new life officially began today. "Good morning, handsome." Isabella's raspy, seductive voice broke the silence. She slowly opened her eyes. "What time is it? Is that depressing woman completely gone from our new house?" "Oh, I guarantee you she is gone," he replied with supreme confidence. "I ordered her to be out before sunrise. She has absolutely zero options. She has no money, no power, and no friends. She is just a weak, useless woman who leached off my success." Isabella smiled from ear to ear. She sat up in bed. Her silk nightgown slipped down, exposing her shoulders. "Perfect. I am dying to officially move in. This penthouse is nice, but that Lincoln Park estate is a literal palace. And I am going to be the queen of the castle. Absolutely. Babe. Anything you want, Ethan said smoothly. Come on, get dressed. Today, we are having a celebratory breakfast in our new mansion. I will order the cleaning crew to throw every single thing left behind by Ava straight into the dumpster. I do not want a single trace of her existence left in my house. An hour later, Ethan's roaring Porsche smoothly pulled into the massive driveway of the estate. Ethan stepped out of the car wearing expensive sunglasses, feeling like an absolute king. Isabella walked arrogantly by his side, her arm linked with his. Ethan unlocked the massive front doors. Welcome to our palace, my queen, he declared. They stepped inside. Something felt completely off. The massive house was incredibly silent, but it was also shockingly clean, far too clean. Ethan fully expected Ava to have left a trail of emotional chaos, perhaps throwing things around, smashing dishes, or leaving tear-soaked tissues everywhere. But that was not the case at all. Ethan quickly walked toward the master bedroom and pushed the door open. His heart skipped a beat. He found the bedroom flawlessly organized. The exact bed where Ava had been writhing in agonizing pain just yesterday was now perfectly made with crisp, spotless white sheets. There was no trace of any medicine bottles, no shattered glass on the floor. Even the expensive rug next to the bed, where Ava had dropped her water glass, was completely dry and vacuumed perfectly. She must have deep cleaned the place before she left, Ethan muttered, genuinely bewildered. Well, it is good she finally learned how to behave, Isabella sneered from behind him. At least she was useful one last time. Ethan felt a strange, creeping sense of unease. It was incredibly weird. How on earth could Ava, suffering from a severe, blinding fever, clean this massive bedroom so flawlessly, and where did she put the dirty sheets? He aggressively threw open the walk-in closet. Ava's cheap, modest clothes, her long dresses, and her basic shoes were completely gone. The dresser drawers were entirely empty. She really packed up and left, Ethan said, finally letting out a breath of relief. He physically shook off the strange anxiety. Maybe she managed to call a cheap cab and stuffed her things into a garbage bag. Better this way, a clean, permanent break. Of course, it is a clean break. Now, let us measure this room, Isabella squealed with intense excitement. I want to throw this bed in the trash. It is way too outdated. I want a massive custom round bed with a canopy. And these walls definitely need custom wallpaper. I want gold accents everywhere. Isabella practically ran through the massive house. Her shrill voice echoed off the high ceilings, shattering the quiet. She pointed her perfectly manicured finger at various expensive items. This sofa is hideous. Burn it. That painting is incredibly tacky. Throw it in the garbage. This kitchen needs a total gut renovation immediately. I want custom marble cabinets imported straight from Italy. Ethan just smiled, completely blinded. Yes, babe. I will replace every single thing, just for you. Tonight, we are going to celebrate. I am inviting all our closest friends over. I am going to hire the most expensive luxury catering service in the city. Ethan pulled out his smartphone and quickly dialed his go-to premium catering company. He aggressively ordered the most expensive items on the menu, imported Wagyu beef, massive towers of fresh seafood, and premium Napa Valley and French wines. Understood, Mr. Ethan, the total invoice for tonight's rush order comes to $2,000. As per our standard policy, we require a 50% deposit paid up front right now. The catering manager stated over the phone. Obviously. Send me the digital invoice link. I will pay it right now with my premium platinum credit card, Ethan said with immense arrogance. He sat back on the expensive sofa that Isabella had just claimed she hated and opened his banking app. He tried to process the $1,000 catering deposit. He typed in his platinum credit card details and hit the process payment button. The phone screen displayed a loading circle for a few seconds. Then, a bright red notification popped up on the screen. Transaction declined. Ethan frowned deeply. That is weird. The available credit limit on this card is easily in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It is probably just a bad cell signal, he muttered to himself. He hit the button again, transaction declined. Babe, why is this taking so long? Isabella complained, currently busy taking duck-face selfies in the grand foyer. Just give me 1 second, babe. I think Bank of America is having server issues, he lied, trying to sound completely unbothered. Ethan was starting to feel a tiny prick of embarrassment. He quickly pulled out a different premium credit card from the same bank and entered the numbers. Declined. A cold drop of sweat began to form on his temple. This was impossible. He was a high-tier VIP wealth management client. Why on earth were all his premium cards declining? He desperately typed in his main checking account debit card numbers. Declined. Insufficient funds. Ethan's eyes went wide with sheer panic. Insufficient funds. That is completely impossible. My massive corporate bonus just cleared 3 days ago. He frantically closed the catering payment link and opened his main Bank of America mobile banking app. His heart was hammering against his ribs. He rapidly typed in his secure password. The screen loaded for a terrifying second, and then a stark, bold message appeared. Account access locked. Please contact your nearest branch immediately. Ethan's entire body went rigid. Cold, suffocating panic began to spread rapidly through his chest. This was an absolute disaster. He could not access his main checking account. He could not use any of his massive credit lines. Ethan, the catering guy just texted me. He says the payment keeps getting rejected. This is so embarrassing. Isabella yelled, marching into the living room. Her flawless face was now twisted in a nasty scowl. Relax, babe, just relax. Ethan was internally panicking. He suddenly remembered he still had an old, hidden emergency checking account at a completely different local bank, an account he barely used that had absolutely no credit lines attached to it. The balance was not huge, but there were definitely a few $1,000s sitting in there. With badly trembling hands, he linked that obscure account and tried to pay the catering deposit. Payment successful. Ethan let out a massive, shaky sigh of relief. For a brief moment, he managed to save face in front of Isabella. See? I told you it was just a stupid bank server issue, Ethan said, forcing a terribly fake, strained smile. It is all handled. The luxury catering crew will be here at 7 p.m. sharp. Isabella instantly perked up again. Perfect. Now I need to go to my favorite salon to get my hair and makeup done. The second Isabella walked out the front door, Ethan's fake smile vanished instantly. His face turned paper white. Something was incredibly wrong. Why was his primary VIP account locked? Did this have something to do with Ava? Impossible. That stupid, pathetic woman did not have the brain capacity or the power to pull off something like this. He aggressively promised himself that first thing tomorrow morning, he would march right into the bank lobby and cause a massive scene. He would demand a huge financial compensation for this unacceptable humiliation, without a doubt. As he paced nervously back and forth across the living room, desperately suppressing his anxiety, the doorbell rang. Ethan practically ripped the front door open. A uniformed courier was standing on the porch, holding a large, thick brown envelope. Mr. Ethan? Yes, that is me. Certified legal courier delivery. I need your signature right here, please. Ethan aggressively scribbled his name on the electronic pad, slammed the door shut, and examined the heavy envelope. The sender's address belonged to an insanely expensive, legendary corporate law firm in Chicago, Miller and Reed LLP. Ethan assumed it had to be expedited court approval documents regarding his divorce petition. He ripped the envelope open impatiently, but the thick stack of papers inside was not from family court. It was a formal corporate legal summons, a notice of extreme default. His eyes frantically skimmed over the harsh, terrifyingly formal legal jargon. Dear Sir, acting on behalf of our client, AC Enterprises, we are formally notifying you that you are in severe breach of contract regarding your corporate credit facility. The entire principal balance of your corporate loan, exactly $4 million, is now due immediately in full. We are granting you a strict grace period of exactly 3 days to liquidate this entire debt. Should you fail to wire the total amount, we will immediately execute a hostile forced seizure of all listed collateral assets. Name the residential estate located at 12 Oakwood Drive, Lincoln Park, and 1 luxury Porsche. The expensive crystal glass Ethan had been holding slipped from his fingers and shattered into 100 pieces on the imported marble floor. Sweat was now pouring down his face like rain. 3 days. $4 million. The house repossessed. No, this is impossible, he whispered, his entire body shaking violently. I just paid the massive monthly installment last week. What breach of contract? And who the hell is AC Enterprises? His grand, arrogant victory celebration had suddenly violently morphed into the absolute beginning of a living nightmare. That night, surrounded by loud music, expensive food, and the obnoxious laughter of his friends and Isabella, Ethan could only force a sickly, dead smile. His mind was in total chaos. He could literally feel an invisible noose slowly tightening around his throat. Ethan did not sleep a single second that entire night. Beside him, Isabella snored softly, exhausted from partying. But inside Ethan's mind, the terrifying legal threats from the notice spun on an endless, agonizing loop. $4 million. 3 days. Hostile forced seizure. AC Enterprises. The second the first ray of dawn hit the window, Ethan leaped out of bed. His body ached, and his eyes were bloodshot and wild. He did not shower, he just splashed cold water on his face and threw on random clothes. He no longer cared about his perfect appearance. At 8 a.m. sharp, the exact second the bank unlocked its doors, Ethan was already slamming his Porsche into the parking lot of his primary Bank of America branch, the place where he was supposed to be a highly respected VIP client. He had to clear up this massive mistake right now. It had to be a catastrophic clerical error. It just had to be. Ethan stormed through the glass doors, completely ignoring the long line of regular customers, and marched aggressively straight up to the VIP wealth management desk. "I am Ethan. I demand to see the branch manager, this exact second," he barked loudly, slamming his heavy metal VIP debit card directly onto the mahogany desk. The startled bank associate immediately scrambled to accommodate him. Ethan was escorted into a private, soundproof glass office to wait. 5 minutes later, an impeccably dressed senior wealth manager walked in. It was not the local branch manager. It was someone much higher up the corporate ladder. "Good morning, Mr. Ethan. How can I assist you today?" "Cut the corporate nonsense," Ethan interrupted him aggressively. "Explain to me right now why every single one of my premium credit cards is locked, why my main checking account is frozen solid, and why the hell I received a completely absurd breach of contract notice, demanding $4 million. The senior manager calmly looked down at his dual computer monitors. "I deeply apologize for the inconvenience, Mr. Ethan. Please allow me a moment to review your portfolio." This is highly unusual." "What is highly unusual?" Ethan screamed. The manager slowly raised his eyes. "We are not the ones who blocked your accounts or locked your credit cards, sir. The reality is, your checking account balance is literally zero, and the maximum limits on every single one of your credit lines have been completely maxed out." "Impossible!" Ethan roared. "My corporate salary deposits are massive, and my combined credit limit is in the hundreds of thousands. I did not spend a single dime yesterday." "That is correct, sir. However, our internal systems show an automated, hostile emergency sweep was executed against your accounts yesterday at exactly 12:01 a.m. This aggressive sweep instantly drained every single dollar from your checking account and simultaneously maxed out every available cent on all your credit cards to cover extreme penalty fees." Ethan turned the color of chalk. "An emergency sweep? Authorized by who?" The manager looked back at his screen. "Not authorized by us, sir. The sweep was legally executed by the current owner of your massive corporate loan facility." "Current owner?" "According to our secure ledger, the $4 million corporate loan you initially took out with our bank was bundled and sold exactly 6 months ago to a massive private equity firm called AC Enterprises. We merely act as the payment processor for your monthly installments." Ethan's stomach dropped to the floor. AC Enterprises. Why would they do this? "I have never been late on a single payment in my life." The manager slowly shook his head. "That is entirely outside of our jurisdiction, sir. According to the legally binding notice we received late last night from AC Enterprises, you have been formally declared in severe default, triggering the hostile takeover clause of the loan agreement. When a severe default is triggered, AC Enterprises holds the absolute legal right to forcibly extract funds directly from your linked accounts as an initial late penalty. And it appears that is exactly what their automated systems did." Ethan lost all the strength in his legs. He gripped the edge of the heavy desk to keep from collapsing. "How? How can I possibly be in default? We do not have access to the specifics of their private contracts, sir. The exact reason is undoubtedly detailed in the legal summons you received. You will have to contact AC Enterprises or their legal team directly to resolve this," the manager said with a flat, emotionless tone, as if he were discussing the weather. Ethan stumbled out of the bank. The sky felt like it was spinning, and cold sweat completely soaked his shirt. He collapsed into the driver's seat of his Porsche, the very car that was going to be repossessed in 3 days. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. AC Enterprises. That name again. He pulled out his phone and frantically Googled AC Enterprises. What popped up was a massive, intimidating global corporate giant, an unstoppable conglomerate operating heavily in luxury fashion, global skincare, and aggressive commercial real estate. Their sleek corporate logo was plastered everywhere. Ethan had vaguely seen the logo before, but he had never paid any real attention to it. Why? Why would a multi-billion-dollar corporate empire specifically buy my pathetic, insignificant loan? He muttered in sheer desperation. Then, his eyes widened as he remembered the name of the ruthless law firm on the summons, Miller and Reed LLP. Gathering whatever shred of courage he had left, he dialed the direct phone number printed at the bottom of the legal threat. Good morning, my name is Ethan. I received a hostile legal summons yesterday on behalf of AC Enterprises. Look, this has to be a massive clerical error. I have never defaulted on my loan. The voice on the other end of the line was a lawyer, and he sounded terrifyingly calm and freezing cold. There is absolutely no error, Mr. Ethan. Our client is acting strictly within the bounds of corporate law. You have severely violated Section 11, Clause B, of the Master Loan Agreement you signed. Section 11, Clause B. What the hell is that? If you find it too bothersome to read the legally binding contracts you sign, Mr. Ethan, allow me to clarify. That specific clause explicitly mandates that the borrower must maintain a stable, moral family household and strictly refrain from engaging in any immoral, scandalous, or disgraceful acts that could publicly damage the reputation of the corporate loan facility. Ethan fell dead silent. He felt the blood freeze in his veins. That is a completely absurd clause. That has absolutely nothing to do with financial debt. It has absolutely everything to do with it, Mr. Ethan. When your toxic debt was purchased by our client, all embedded clauses, specifically the strict morality clause, were fully activated and heavily monitored. Our client is a corporation that highly values traditional family integrity. Your specific actions of brutally divorcing and evicting your severely ill wife, Miss Ava, in order to openly cohabitate with a much younger mistress. That constitutes a catastrophic breach of Section 11, Clause B. Ethan could not breathe. How? How do you people know about that? We possess irrefutable, hard evidence, Mr. Ethan. High-definition photographs, crystal-clear audio recordings, and sworn witness testimonies. We know exactly what time you threw your sick wife out onto the street 2 nights ago. That singular action is what immediately triggered this hostile default protocol. Ethan's knees gave out completely inside the car. Ava. This was all because of Ava. But how? How on earth does Ava know anyone at AC Enterprises? What do these corporate monsters want from me? Give me time, I will pay the installments, Ethan pleaded into the phone, now openly shaking with raw fear. It is far too late for that. Our client has zero interest in your pathetic installments. According to the legal summons, your grace period is rapidly expiring. Let us see, you have exactly 2 days and 8 hours left to wire the full $4 million. If the funds are not secured, our hostile extraction team will physically repossess your estate and your vehicle. The call abruptly disconnected. Ethan violently hurled his cell phone against the dashboard, screaming like a madman inside the luxury car, $4 million in 2 days. It was mathematically impossible. His massive salary was frozen. His only real assets were this house and this car, which he just realized did not actually belong to him at all. He aggressively rubbed his face, trying to force himself to think clearly. Ava. This has to be Ava's doing. But how? Does Ava scrub toilets at AC Enterprises and somehow manage to cry to her billionaire boss? Impossible. It makes zero logical sense. He frantically tried to find out who actually owned AC Enterprises. He opened a premium business news portal. The primary owner of AC Enterprises was a highly secretive, mysterious figure. The global empire was publicly run by a ruthless CEO named Director Olivia Hayes. Olivia. Ethan aggressively frowned. The name sounded incredibly familiar. Suddenly, a memory slammed into him. Years ago, Ava had constantly talked about a woman named Olivia, an older friend from her silly neighborhood church group, claiming she was an incredible, inspiring person. Ethan had always mocked her ruthlessly for it. It is probably just a bunch of bored housewives gossiping, he used to say. Could it be? Is Ava's pathetic little church friend actually the ruthless CEO of AC Enterprises? Ethan's head was throbbing with blinding pain. This whole conspiracy was too insanely complicated. He had to find Ava. He had to drop to his knees and beg Ava. He had to beg her to call off her billionaire friend Olivia. Yes, that was the only possible way out of this nightmare. He slammed the car into gear and sped off. He desperately needed to know where Ava was hiding right now. He had to drive to her parents' rundown, pathetic house. He had to go right this second. As he recklessly sped out of the bank parking lot, his phone rang loudly. It was Isabella. Ethan aggressively ignored the call. Isabella called again, and again. Furious, Ethan snatched the phone and yelled. What? Where are you, Babe? Why are you screaming at me? Get over here right now. The platinum card you gave me this morning just declined at the luxury salon. I am literally dying of embarrassment in front of everyone. Do you actually have any real money? Ethan punched the steering wheel. More massive problems. I am dealing with a massive corporate emergency. Just pay for it with your own money for now. What? My own money? Are you insane? Transfer cash to me right this second. I told you I am dealing with an emergency. Ethan hung up violently. Inside the high-end salon, Isabella stared at her phone in absolute shock. That was the very first time Ethan had ever raised his voice at her. A dark, creeping suspicion began to take root in her mind. The supposedly ultra-wealthy man she had been bragging about to all her friends was suddenly having catastrophic issues with every single credit card he owned. The suspicion grew rapidly. Ethan no longer gave a damn about Isabella. He mashed the accelerator of his Porsche. He had to find Ava. He would literally kiss the ground Ava walked on if it meant saving his assets. What he did not know was that the Ava he was frantically searching for was currently resting comfortably, fully recovering from her illness. She was sitting in an absurdly expensive leather chair inside her penthouse corner office on the top floor of the AC Enterprises Tower in downtown Chicago, calmly sipping tea while actively monitoring Ethan's pathetic, panicked movements through live updates from her elite legal team. Ethan could not escape the trap. The second day was pure, agonizing hell. His frantic drive to Ava's parents' house ended in total disaster. Her parents' house was small, old, and modest, exactly as he expected. But Ava's parents, despite looking working class, glared at him with a lethal mixture of pure hatred and disgust. Ava is not here. And we have absolutely no idea where our daughter is. You threw my sick daughter out into the street, didn't you? Ava's father demanded. His voice was shaking with barely contained, explosive rage. And now, you have the nerve to come crawling here looking for her. Get the hell off my property. If you ever step foot near this house again, I will call the cops. Ethan drove back to the city with absolutely nothing to show for it. The tiny amount of cash he had left in his backup account was entirely blown on expensive gas for the frantic round trip. That night, he and Isabella had an explosive, screaming argument. Isabella viciously demanded to know exactly what was going on. Standing on the very edge of the abyss, Ethan finally cracked and confessed. He lied, claiming he was just having a temporary administrative issue with the IRS and that his accounts were just temporarily frozen. But Isabella was not stupid. She had found the legal summons from Miller and Reed LLP sitting on the kitchen counter. 3 days. $4 million. Foreclosure. Are you completely broke, Ethan? Isabella screamed, going entirely hysterical. It is just a temporary cash flow issue. I am going to fix it. This is all that Psycho Ava's fault. Ethan roared in pure frustration. I do not care whose fault it is. I refuse to live with a broke loser. That night, they slept in the freezing, massive luxury bed, their backs turned aggressively away from each other. Ethan could not close his eyes for a single second. The terrifying countdown clock in his head continued to tick loudly. Tomorrow was the third day. The morning of the third day was the single most terrifying moment of Ethan's entire existence. The sun rose, but it felt like the literal end of the world. At 9 a.m. sharp, while he and Isabella were eating breakfast in a suffocating, hostile silence, the heavy doorbell rang. Ethan and Isabella locked eyes. Both of their faces instantly drained of all color. Ethan frantically shook his head. Do not open it. Pretend nobody is home. The doorbell rang again, this time much longer, accompanied by aggressive, heavy pounding on the solid oak door. Mr. Ethan, we know you are inside. We are the asset execution team from the law firm of Miller and Reed LLP. Open the door immediately. Ethan's heart completely stopped. Isabella began to hyperventilate and cry out in sheer terror. What are we going to do, Ethan? What the hell are we going to do? Isabella sobbed. Ethan, blinded by terror, sprinted toward the back patio doors. He thought he could hop the fence and escape through the garden, but the second he ripped the back door open, 2 massive, heavily armed private security contractors were already standing on the patio. Step back inside the residence, sir, they ordered with terrifying calm. Ethan was completely surrounded. He slowly backed into the living room. Seconds later, the legal team managed to breach the front door using a professional locksmith they had brought along. A tall, ruthless-looking lawyer in an impeccably tailored suit marched in holding a thick clipboard. Behind him, several burly repossession agents carried stacks of bright red legal seizure stickers. Mr. Ethan. Your strict grace period expired exactly 3 minutes ago, the lawyer stated with a voice as cold as ice. By direct court order, we are initiating the immediate, hostile foreclosure and physical seizure of this property and every single asset contained within to settle our client's unpaid corporate debt. AC Enterprises. No, please just give me more time. Ethan instantly dropped to his knees on the marble floor. His massive, inflated arrogance vanished into thin air. I will pay. I swear to God. Just give me one more week. The lawyer slowly shook his head. You were given more than enough time. My extraction team is beginning their work right now. You are legally permitted to take only the personal clothing currently on your back. You have exactly 15 minutes to voluntarily vacate this premises before you are arrested for trespassing. 15 minutes. Isabella screamed at the top of her lungs. At that exact moment, the brutal reality fully crashed down on Isabella. She stared down at Ethan, who was kneeling on the floor, weeping uncontrollably like a pathetic child. The wealthy, powerful man she honestly believed was a king was now nothing more than a sniveling beggar. Isabella's beautiful face hardened into stone. She absolutely refused to go down with this sinking ship. Without saying a single word, Isabella sprinted up the stairs to the master bedroom. A completely bewildered Ethan screamed, "Isabella, where are you going? Help me!" The repossession agents swarmed the house, completely ignoring the pathetic domestic drama. They aggressively began slapping bright red AC Enterprises seizure stickers on the massive flat-screen TVs, the imported Italian leather sofas, and the insanely expensive oil paintings. Outside, the loud, grinding noise of a heavy tow truck echoed as it dragged Ethan's beloved Porsche roughly out of the pristine garage. 5 minutes later, Isabella marched back down the stairs. She was no longer crying. She was aggressively dragging 2 massive Louis Vuitton suitcases that she had apparently packed days ago in secret. She completely ignored Ethan, who was staring up at her in absolute shock, and marched straight toward the open front door. "Isabella, are you abandoning me?" Ethan screamed, his voice breaking with pathetic desperation. Isabella stopped in the doorway. She turned around, her face twisted in pure disgust. "Abandoning you? Obviously. I refuse to live in the gutter with a broke, pathetic loser like you. I actually thought you were a king, but you are just a broke clown. Enjoy your bankruptcy alone, Ethan. I already called an Uber Black. Goodbye." Isabella stormed out, dragging her heavy designer luggage past the armed security guards, without ever looking back. Ethan remained frozen on his knees, brutally betrayed and completely abandoned, exactly the same way he had treated Ava just 3 days ago. The only difference was that Ava was violently kicked out while suffering from a severe illness, whereas Isabella abandoned him at the absolute peak of his financial ruin. "Your time is up, Mr. Ethan," a massive security guard said, firmly grabbing Ethan by the back of his shirt. Ethan was physically dragged out of his own massive house. He was tossed roughly onto the hot concrete of the sidewalk. He was still wearing his silk pajamas. He watched in horror as his precious Porsche was towed down the street. He watched the front doors of his massive estate get wrapped in heavy steel chains and locked with industrial padlocks. Everything he owned had vanished in exactly 3 days. Ethan collapsed onto the sidewalk, utterly powerless. Wealthy neighbors walking their dogs stared at him like he was a crazy person. The man who had been the most arrogant guy in the neighborhood was now a pathetic public spectacle. He was entirely alone, totally broke, completely homeless, and utterly abandoned. In his state of extreme panic and unspeakable public humiliation, his fried brain could only focus on one single name. The ultimate source of this nightmare. Ava. He frantically dug through his pajama pockets. His old, cracked backup cell phone was still in there. He had absolutely no idea who else to call. He wanted to scream and curse at Ava. He had to beg Ava. He did not know what to do. He just needed to explode. With violently trembling hands, he searched his contacts for Ava, my wife. He pressed the call button. He honestly did not expect her to answer. Maybe she had changed her number, or the phone was turned off. But it rang once, twice, and on the third ring, the call connected. "Speak." The voice definitely belonged to Ava, but it was not the weak, sickly, pathetic voice he was used to. It was the calm, crystal clear, freezing cold voice of a highly powerful woman. Ethan, who had been fully prepared to scream at her, suddenly felt incredibly small and terrified. He started to cry. His pathetic sobbing simply exploded out of him. It was the pathetic wail of a broken loser. "Ava!" Ethan screamed, his voice cracking hysterically. "Ava, you have to help me, please. Ava, I do not know what is going on. They repossessed our massive house, they towed my car, they kicked me out. I am literally sitting in the gutter, Ava. Why is this happening to me? High up on the 40th floor of the AC Enterprises Tower in Chicago, inside a massive VIP suite that had been converted into a luxurious temporary executive office, Ava sat perfectly still. She was no longer sick in bed. She was flawlessly healthy, radiating intense energy, and incredibly dignified. A custom emerald silk scarf perfectly framed her sharp, highly determined face. Sitting across the massive glass conference table were Director Hayes and several elite corporate department heads in the middle of a high-level briefing. The cheap old cell phone Ava had ordered Director Hayes to retrieve from the Lincoln Park house was vibrating on the glass table. The name Ethan flashed on the cracked screen. The corporate meeting instantly stopped, every single pair of eyes locked onto Ava. Ava slowly raised one perfectly manicured hand, silently ordering the room to remain dead quiet. She looked at Director Hayes and offered a very slight, dangerous smile. She tapped the speakerphone button so every executive in the room could hear the pathetic display. Ethan's hysterical, snot-filled sobbing instantly echoed off the glass walls. Ava, please help me. Ava, I do not know what happened. They took the house, they took the Porsche, they dragged me outside. I am on the street, Ava. Why is this happening? Ava waited patiently for Ethan to finish his pathetic crying fit. She gestured for the executives to remain perfectly silent. The absolute silence in the boardroom heavily contrasted with Ethan's panicked, hyperventilating voice echoing from the phone. After Ethan finally stopped sobbing to catch his breath, Ava leaned closer to the microphone. She replied with a voice so calm, so incredibly powerful, a voice Ethan had never heard from her in his entire life. I apologize, who is this? There was dead silence on the other end of the line. Ethan's pathetic sobbing stopped instantly. What? What? It is me, Ava. Ethan. Your husband? Ah, Mr. Ethan, Ava said with a completely indifferent tone, as if she were speaking to a random telemarketer. I believe there is a massive misunderstanding here. First of all, you are no longer my husband. My elite legal team filed the expedited divorce papers this morning. Secondly, you mean your house. Exactly 3 days ago, you made it violently clear that it was your house, not ours, did you not? Ethan gasped for air. His throat was bone dry. This voice definitely belonged to Ava, but this was not his Ava. This was not the weak, submissive woman he could step all over. This voice was dripping with absolute corporate authority. Ava, where are you hiding? He whispered, genuinely terrified. What did you do to me? Your voice, are you completely cured? I am in the middle of an extremely important board meeting right now, Ava replied smoothly. She leaned back in her expensive leather chair, staring out at the breathtaking Chicago skyline through the massive floor-to-ceiling window behind her. We were just discussing a multi-billion-dollar corporate expansion into the Middle East. Something a mid-level manager like you would never comprehend. Real business, you know? Ethan was entirely confused. Ava, stop talking crazy. Help me. He begged again. I know this is your doing. I know for a fact this is all because of your stupid church friend, Director Olivia, isn't it? You cried to her. Please, Ava, just tell her to call off her corporate attack dogs. I will do whatever you want. I will come back to you. I will dump Isabella right now, I swear to God. A freezing, deeply cynical laugh echoed through the speaker. It was Ava laughing. Come back to me? Do you honestly think I would ever dig through the trash to retrieve the garbage I threw away? And as for Isabella, you are way too late, Ethan. She dumped you an hour ago. The second the foreclosure team breached the door, my legal team immediately sent me the live update. Ethan felt like a massive bucket of ice water had been dumped over his head. Ava knew. She knew absolutely everything. She was watching his entire life collapse in real time. Who the hell are you? Ethan whispered in pure, unadulterated terror. The hair on the back of his neck stood straight up. Who the hell are you, Ava? Ava smiled coldly. Do you really want to know the truth, Ethan? For all the years you lived with me, you constantly insulted me. You called me a sick, broke little woman who just wasted her time playing on her laptop. You never once bothered to ask what I was actually doing on that laptop. What are you talking about? Ava signaled Director Hayes. Director Hayes leaned into the microphone. Hello. Mr. Ethan. You are currently speaking directly to the Supreme Board of Directors of AC Enterprises. Ethan instantly recognized the freezing, calm voice from the hostile legal phone call. Director Hayes. Why do you have Ava's phone? What exactly is your relationship with my wife? Ava took control of the conversation again. She is not my church friend, Ethan. She is my absolute right hand. The CEO who runs my massive global empire for me. Dead silence. Ethan's fried brain violently struggled to process this catastrophic information. You asked who I am? Ava continued smoothly. She stood up and walked right up to the massive glass window, staring down at the busy Chicago streets far below, where Ethan could very well be sitting like a beggar. You called the number of the broke, pathetic wife you brutally abandoned, but allow me to formally introduce myself. Ava's voice now echoed with terrifying, absolute power. Hello, Ethan. You are currently speaking to Ava, the sole owner, founder, and supreme chairwoman of AC Enterprises, the global conglomerate with a net monthly profit of $1.5 million. The exact same company that just hostilely seized every single asset you thought you owned. The cheap cell phone slipped out of Ethan's sweaty hands and hit the concrete sidewalk with a dull smack. Ethan himself was completely frozen, his eyes bulging out of his skull in sheer, absolute terror as he stared blankly at the hot pavement. He literally stopped breathing. His entire universe had not just shattered into a million pieces, it had been violently erased from existence. Ethan collapsed entirely onto the filthy sidewalk, turned to solid stone. His phone lay next to him. The screen was cracked, but the call was still connected. He could hear Ava's calm, steady breathing on the other end of the line, a terrifying contrast to the frantic, panicked hammering of his own heart. No, this is mathematically impossible, Ethan whispered, aggressively refusing to believe reality, his voice totally broken. This has to be a nightmare. Ava, you are lying to me, aren't you? This is all a massive lie. Ava's voice echoed from the phone, colder, and more emotionless than before. I do not have time for petty lies, Ethan. I am incredibly busy, but since today is the grand finale of your absolute ruin, I am willing to grant you a few minutes of my extremely expensive time. There was a long, heavy silence. Ethan remained in a state of deep shock, staring blankly at the asphalt under his dirty feet. Look up, Ethan, Ava commanded sharply. Look across the street, slightly to your left. Slowly, like a broken, malfunctioning robot, Ethan raised his heavy head. His swollen, bloodshot eyes squinted against the bright midday sun. Across the incredibly busy Chicago Avenue, a massive, towering blue glass skyscraper stood arrogantly against the sky. At the very top of the building, two giant, glowing letters reflected the sunlight. Ace. That building, Ethan whispered, his throat feeling like sandpaper. Yes, AC Enterprises, Ava replied smoothly. I am standing right now on the 40th floor. I can see you perfectly from my window. You look absolutely pathetic sitting in the gutter like that. The private security guards for this block are going to physically remove you very soon. Ethan swallowed hard. A freezing terror shot straight down his spine. Ava was literally looking down on him like a god. Walk into the main lobby, Ava continued. I want to see you face to face. I want to see with my own two eyes exactly how the face of an incredibly arrogant man completely crumbles to dust. The call disconnected. Ethan sat frozen for a full, agonizing minute. His body was completely paralyzed. He had absolutely nothing left. The massive house was gone, the Porsche was gone, Isabella was gone, and now even his massive male ego was about to be ground into dirt. He had no other options. Where else could he possibly go? A sickening, morbid curiosity, violently mixed with a stupid, desperate hope that he could beg for mercy, forced him to his feet. With heavy, stumbling steps, he stood up. The silk pajamas he was wearing were now stained black with street dirt. He walked like a mindless zombie straight toward the massive revolving glass doors of the Ace skyscraper, completely ignoring the loud, angry honking of the Chicago traffic around him. The lobby of the skyscraper was an entirely different universe. The massive floor was made of imported, highly polished Italian marble. A massive artificial waterfall flowed down one of the main walls. Dozens of elite corporate employees, dressed in impeccably tailored suits, rushed back and forth, looking incredibly busy and important. The freezing blast of the central air conditioning hit his sweat-soaked body and made him shiver violently. Ethan stood frozen in the exact center of all that extreme wealth, looking completely lost. He was like a disgusting stain on a pristine white canvas. A beautiful, highly professional receptionist glared at him with a harsh mixture of disgust and high alert. "Excuse me, sir. Can I help you?" the receptionist demanded. Her tone was openly hostile. Ethan stammered pathetically. "I am here to see Ava. Miss Ava." The receptionist raised a highly skeptical eyebrow. "Miss Ava? You mean our chairwoman? Do you have a scheduled appointment?" "No, but she specifically told me to come up here. Just tell her Ethan is in the lobby." I apologize, sir. You absolutely cannot proceed past the security desk without a verified appointment. The receptionist already had her hand firmly on the security radio, clearly seconds away from calling the armed guards to throw him out. Let him through. A sharp, commanding voice cut off the receptionist. Ethan spun around. Director Olivia Hayes was standing there, flanked by two massive, heavily armed corporate security contractors. Director Hayes's face was a mask of calm, but her sharp eyes looked at Ethan with pure, unfiltered disgust. So, you are the infamous Ethan. Ethan instantly recognized the woman, Ava's supposed silly church friend, Olivia. Allow me to formally correct you, Mr. Ethan, Director Hayes said, her voice dripping with ice. I am not her little church friend. I am her chief executive officer. Now, follow me. Chairwoman Ava is expecting you. Ethan was escorted right through the center of the massive lobby, offering absolutely zero resistance. Every single pair of eyes in the building was now locked onto him. A filthy, unshaven man in stained silk pajamas, being heavily escorted by the CEO and armed guards. Loud whispers began to echo across the marble floor. Ethan desperately wanted to hide his face, but he had absolutely no pride left to protect. They did not take him to the main employee elevators. Director Hayes ordered him to stop directly in the center of the VIP waiting area, right in the middle of the lobby. Stand exactly here. Chairwoman Ava is coming down. Ethan went completely rigid. His heart was hammering so violently against his ribs that it caused physical pain. He felt like a condemned prisoner waiting for the executioner to drop the axe. Every single second felt like an hour. Suddenly, a soft, distinct ding echoed from the private VIP elevator bank at the far end of the lobby. Instantly, every single movement in the massive lobby ceased completely. The busy executives, the receptionist, even the armed guards at the front doors stopped whatever they were doing. They stood perfectly straight, all facing the VIP elevator. Several of them offered slight, respectful nods. The brushed steel doors of the VIP elevator slid open. Two massive, suit-clad personal bodyguards stepped out first, firmly taking positions on either side of the doors. And then, Ava stepped out. Ethan completely lost his breath. He could have died right on the spot. This woman was definitely Ava, but she was absolutely not the Ava he knew. The woman walking slowly toward him was an absolute queen. She was wearing a breathtakingly expensive, sapphire blue designer skirt suit that fit her commanding presence perfectly. A matching silk scarf elegantly framed her sharp face in a modern, powerful style. Her face, which used to look so pale and exhausted, was now glowing with health, enhanced by subtle, insanely expensive makeup that made her eyes look like daggers. She walked with terrifying confidence. Her designer heels clicked softly but with absolute authority against the marble floor. An undeniable aura of massive wealth and supreme power radiated from every single movement she made. The executives she walked past greeted her with deep, fearful respect. Good afternoon, Chairwoman. Ethan shook violently. Chairwoman. Director Hayes immediately stepped toward Ava and offered a slight, deeply respectful nod. Chairwoman, he is waiting. Ava simply nodded. Her piercing gaze never once left Ethan. She walked slowly toward him. Every single step she took felt like it was physically crushing the last remaining fragments of Ethan's pathetic ego. She stopped exactly 3 feet away from the trembling, filthy man. Ava slowly looked Ethan up and down, from his messy, greasy hair down to his stained pajamas and the cheap hotel slippers he was wearing. Her look was freezing cold, highly analytical, and completely devoid of mercy. Ava. Ethan barely managed to choke out a whisper. Yes, Ethan. It is me, Ava said. Her voice was calm and crystal clear, echoing perfectly through the dead silent lobby. The sick, broke little woman you violently threw away 3 days ago. Ethan could not take it anymore. Every ounce of his strength completely vanished. His knees gave out entirely. He collapsed uncontrollably onto the freezing marble floor, dropping to his knees right at Ava's designer shoes, and began weeping hysterically. Ava, I am so sorry. Please, Ava, I made a massive mistake. I was totally blind. I committed a horrible sin against you. Ethan desperately tried to grab the hem of Ava's designer jacket, but his hands were shaking far too violently. Everyone in the massive lobby stared in absolute shock. The scene was unbelievably jarring. A grown man sobbing hysterically on his knees at the feet of their terrifying chairwoman. Ava's 2 massive bodyguards immediately stepped forward to violently drag Ethan away, but Ava raised one hand, silently ordering them to stop. She wanted Ethan to feel every single agonizing second of this public humiliation. Forgive me, Ava. Let me come back to our house, please. I will divorce Isabella today. I will be your loyal husband again. I swear. Ava stared down at him with an entirely blank expression. No pity, no anger, just a freezing, terrifying emptiness. She leaned down slightly, not to help Ethan up, but to whisper directly into his ear. Stand up, she ordered. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried absolute, terrifying authority. Ethan, using whatever pathetic strength he had left, shakily got back to his feet. His face was a disgusting mess of tears and sweat. Ava looked him dead in the eyes. Do you really want to beg? She asked. Her voice was now loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear perfectly. What a pity, Ethan. My corporation does not hire beggars. After delivering that lethal line, Ava smoothly pulled a silk handkerchief from her designer bag. For a split second, Ethan had a stupid, desperate flash of hope that Ava was going to wipe away his tears. Instead, Ava used the expensive silk to aggressively wipe off an imaginary speck of dust from the sleeve of her jacket, exactly where Ethan had almost touched her, as if she had just come into contact with a deadly virus. After delivering that final blow, Ava turned around with terrifying elegance. She walked smoothly back toward the private VIP elevator. Director Hayes, deal with the trash, she ordered without ever looking back. Give him one final corporate lesson. Understood, chairwoman. The steel elevator doors slid shut. Ava completely vanished from his sight. Ethan stood nailed to the marble floor, totally annihilated. The brutal public humiliation he had just received from the woman he used to treat like garbage was 1,000 times more agonizing than losing his massive house and his Porsche. Director Hayes marched up to him. Come with me, Mr. Ethan. Let us finish this pathetic charade. There is something Chairwoman Ava specifically wants you to see. What else? What else can you possibly take from me? Ethan screamed in total despair. Not take, Director Hayes corrected smoothly, but force you to understand just how monumentally stupid you have been this entire time. Ethan was violently dragged by the two security guards, this time toward a highly secure, luxurious boardroom on the mezzanine level. Ethan was violently shoved into an expensive leather chair inside the freezing boardroom. The massive glass wall of the room looked directly out over the lobby, allowing him to see everything and allowing everyone to see him. Sitting across the table, Director Hayes looked completely relaxed, flanked by two ruthless-looking corporate lawyers in expensive suits. Ethan could only hang his head and stare blankly at the polished table. He had already lost everything. There was nothing left to fight for. Mr. Ethan, Director Hayes began. Her tone was incredibly calm, like a college professor about to lecture a particularly slow, stupid student. You seem to still be highly confused about how the wife you arrogantly labeled as a useless, broke, sickly burden, Miss Ava, managed to become the absolute owner of this massive empire. Ethan said absolutely nothing. He did not have the physical energy to speak. Director Hayes pressed a sleek button on the table. A massive projection screen descended from the ceiling, and the boardroom lights automatically dimmed. The screen flashed to life, displaying a massive corporate title card. Financial and Corporate Audit Report. AC Enterprises. All right, let the lesson begin, Mr. Ethan. Let us travel back exactly 5 years, Director Hayes said smoothly. Complex corporate graphs, massive profit and loss statements, and balance sheets displaying billions of dollars began flashing across the screen, making Ethan's eyes physically ache. 5 years ago, you had just been fired from your very first corporate job. You were severely depressed, incredibly angry, and you blamed the entire world for your failures. While you were busy sitting on the couch feeling sorry for yourself, your wife, who you assumed was just a dumb housewife, went to work in your tiny kitchen. Ethan slowly raised his heavy head. She was not cooking your dinner, Director Hayes continued, as if reading his exact thoughts. She was formulating highly advanced skincare serums using proprietary herbal compounds. When you ruthlessly mocked her for staring at her laptop until 3 a.m., she was actually fulfilling hundreds of massive wholesale orders from her first wave of elite clients. When you finally landed your new corporate job and your massive arrogance returned, she was secretly signing a commercial lease for her first production facility. The presentation screen shifted. High-definition photographs appeared. A photo of a cramped office, a photo of a massive industrial warehouse, and a photo of a sprawling, state-of-the-art manufacturing plant. Then, photos of the massive Ace flagship stores in New York, Paris, Shanghai, and Tokyo. AC Enterprises, Mr. Ethan, is Ava Creations. Ava is the name of the woman you threw away. This massive corporation, this entire skyscraper, every single thing you see belongs entirely to her, 100%. Ethan was shaking violently. But how? How did she get the initial funding? Ah, the money. Director Hayes smiled a vicious, cynical smile. You always severely underestimated her, simply because she never demanded anything from you, did she? You were so incredibly proud that you could toss her a pathetic $300 monthly allowance for groceries, an allowance you routinely cut off whenever you threw a temper tantrum. You constantly called her broke. Director Hayes pressed the remote again. The screen shifted violently. A massive, bold number appeared in bright green. $1,500,000. $1.5 million, Director Hayes emphasized every single syllable. That is Miss Ava's personal, liquid, monthly net income. That money was deposited directly into an offshore account in her name, an account you had absolutely zero knowledge of. An income massively larger than the CEO of the pathetic company you work for. That is the woman you insulted and evicted for being poor. Ethan felt violently nauseous. The room felt like it was spinning aggressively. And regarding your massive debt, Director Hayes continued smoothly, the $4 million corporate loan you arrogantly took out to buy that Lincoln Park estate and that Porsche. You were so incredibly arrogant when Bank of America approved it, weren't you? Exactly 1 year ago, when you were moments away from declaring total bankruptcy because you horribly mismanaged your pathetic side business, your loan went into severe default. Bank of America was literally days away from foreclosing on your assets. But Miss Ava found out. Acting through me, AC Enterprises quietly purchased your entire toxic debt portfolio directly from the bank. We bought you. Ethan's eyes bulged out of his head. So, that house and that car have legally belonged to AC Enterprises for an entire year? Correct, Mr. Ethan. Miss Ava saved your pathetic reputation. She allowed you to continue living in that mansion. She allowed you to continue bragging to your friends about your fake success. She was still desperately trying to respect you as her husband. She honestly hoped you would change your toxic behavior. Ethan's tears began to flow again. Not tears of genuine remorse, but tears for his own infinite, staggering stupidity. He had violently kicked out his literal savior. She knew I was cheating on her, Ethan whispered, totally terrified. Of course she knew, Director Hayes snapped. She knew absolutely everything. One of the ruthless corporate lawyers finally spoke up. And now, Mr. Ethan, let us review the hard evidence. The massive screen shifted once again. This time, there were no financial charts. It was high-definition video surveillance footage. Ethan saw his own luxurious Lincoln Park living room. He saw himself passionately kissing Isabella on the expensive sofa. The digital timestamp in the bottom right corner showed the footage was captured exactly 6 months ago, during a time when Ava was supposedly at her church group. The video abruptly switched to the master bedroom. Ethan watched in horror as Isabella tried on Ava's expensive clothes and silk scarves, laughing hysterically and throwing Ava's belongings onto the floor. And Ethan was standing right there, laughing along with her. Then came the final video, the absolute kill shot. Exactly 3 days ago, in that very same bedroom, Ethan watched himself standing arrogantly at the foot of the bed. He saw Ava lying there, looking weak and severely ill. He heard his own cruel, hateful voice echoing through the high-end boardroom speakers. Listen, you sick, broke little woman, I have already taken care of the divorce papers. Get out of my house by tomorrow morning. Stop. Ethan screamed, violently covering his face with both hands. Shut it off, please, just shut it off. The screen instantly went black. The boardroom plunged back into a terrifying silence. Hidden microcameras, the lawyer stated calmly. Secretly installed exactly 1 year ago, by Miss Ava, the very moment she suspected you were bringing another woman into her house. Ethan was completely annihilated. The evidence was absolutely irrefutable. He could not deny a single thing. Ava. Is she going to send me to federal prison? Ethan asked, completely consumed by despair. That was the initial legal strategy, Director Hayes admitted smoothly. We had fully prepared aggressive criminal charges for severe verbal domestic abuse, reckless endangerment, and massive financial fraud regarding the marital assets. It would have been more than enough to let you rot in a federal cell for a decade. Ethan shook uncontrollably with raw fear. However, Director Hayes continued, Miss Ava changed her mind. A federal prison cell is far too comfortable for a man like you. She wants you to experience something infinitely worse than prison. A lifetime of inescapable, crushing humiliation. Director Hayes slid a thin, sleek folder across the table, stopping right in front of Ethan. This is Miss Ava's official, expedited divorce petition. Inside, you will also find a civil lawsuit demanding massive financial compensation for severe emotional distress. Ethan opened the folder with violently shaking hands. Ava is not demanding an equal division of assets. She absolutely refuses to touch your filthy money. She merely repossessed the estate and the vehicle that legally belonged to her anyway. But you still have to pay heavily for your actions. Ethan gasped for air, his eyes widening in absolute terror when he saw the massive number printed on the lawsuit. $400,000. $400,000, he screamed. I do not have that kind of money. You people already took every single thing I own. Obviously you do not. Director Hayes smiled a freezing, predatory smile. But you still have your high-paying corporate job, do you not? Oh, wait, I almost forgot. Director Hayes's smile grew even wider. Breaking corporate news, Mr. Ethan. Exactly 1 hour ago, AC Enterprises successfully completed a hostile takeover, acquiring a 70% controlling stake in the corporate firm where you work. And as the brand new majority shareholder, Chairwoman Ava's very first executive order was a massive restructuring of upper management. Your official termination papers have already been signed. You are officially fired. This was the absolute final nail in Ethan's coffin. He had lost it all. The mansion, the Porsche, his billionaire wife, his life savings, and now his prestigious corporate job, the absolute source of his arrogant pride. You people are absolute demons, Ethan screamed, his voice totally broken. We merely execute corporate justice, Director Hayes replied flatly. And regarding that $400,000 debt? Miss Ava is feeling incredibly generous today. She knows a pathetic loser like you could never pay it back. Because of that, she is offering you one final option. Director Hayes slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Sign this sworn legal declaration. Officially admit to every single one of your disgusting actions. Admit to the adultery, the severe verbal domestic abuse, and the reckless abandonment of a sick spouse. If you legally confess that you were entirely in the wrong, the $400,000 debt will be completely forgiven. Ethan stared down at the confession. It represented the absolute last shred of his male ego. Why do you even need this? Just an insurance policy, the lawyer stated coldly, to legally guarantee that you never go to the press and invent fake, sob-story lies about our client. Ethan had absolutely no other choice. He was fired, bankrupt, and homeless. With badly trembling hands, he picked up the expensive pen they offered him and signed the legal document, formally confessing to his horrific sins. It is done, Director Hayes said, swiftly snatching the papers off the table. At that exact moment, the heavy boardroom doors swung open. Ava walked back into the room. She stopped right in front of Ethan, who was now completely broken, his head hanging in total defeat. You wanted to divorce me, Ethan? Ava asked, her voice dangerously low. You threw those cheap divorce papers directly at my face while I was violently ill? Ava pulled out the exact same brown manila folder Ethan had thrown onto her bed. Director Hayes had kept it. Right in front of Ethan's terrified eyes, Ava slowly and methodically ripped Ethan's original divorce petition into tiny shreds. The pieces of torn paper fluttered down, landing on Ethan's lap. I am divorcing you, Ava said with absolute, freezing coldness, and my legal team will guarantee you do not walk away with a single cent. She looked down at Ethan one final time. Now, get the hell out of my building. The two massive security guards who had been standing by immediately stepped forward. Take this trash to the curb, Director Hayes ordered. Ethan did not resist. He was totally numb. He was dragged by his armpits. His arms were locked firmly in the guard's grip. He was dragged right through the center of the crowded, elite lobby. The wealthy executive stared at him with a mixture of extreme pity and total disgust. The automated glass doors slid open, and Ethan was violently thrown out onto the blazing hot Chicago sidewalk. He hit the concrete with zero money, zero job prospects, and zero homes, wearing nothing but filthy silk pajamas. Ironically, the legal confession of his horrible sins was the only thing that had saved him from massive, crushing debt. His total ruin was now absolute and permanent. For the second time that day, Ethan was violently thrown onto the scorching asphalt. The heavy glass doors of the Ace skyscraper locked shut behind him, permanently cutting him off from the luxurious, billionaire world he had just discovered belonged entirely to Ava. He coughed violently. The dirty city dust coated his throat. His face was a pathetic mess of dried tears, sweat, and street grime. For a long moment, he did not move a single muscle. His body was totally paralyzed. His fried brain simply could not process the absolute, terrifying speed and perfection of his total destruction. Fired, bankrupt, abandoned by his gold-digger mistress, and publicly annihilated by the billionaire wife he had treated like absolute garbage. The legal confession he had just signed felt exactly like a death warrant. Random Chicagoans walking past stared at him like he was a crazy person, a grown man in dirty pajamas, sobbing uncontrollably in front of a massive corporate skyscraper. A heavily armed security guard was now standing right inside the glass doors, watching him with a lethal glare, fully prepared to act if Ethan tried to step foot inside again. Ethan had to leave. He could not sit on that sidewalk forever. Using whatever pathetic energy he had left, he dragged himself up. His knees shook violently. He began wandering aimlessly down the busy avenue. Where could he possibly go? He had no home. He dug through his empty pajama pockets. His cracked cell phone was gone, left behind in the lobby when the guards dragged him away. He truly had absolutely nothing left in the world except the dirty clothes on his back. His stomach let out a loud, painful growl. He was starving. The last time he had eaten was that incredibly tense breakfast with Isabella. That felt like a lifetime ago. The sun was beginning to set over Lake Michigan. The city air was hot, humid, and suffocating. He suddenly remembered his old frat buddies. His drinking friends. He could definitely beg them for a temporary loan. He dragged his feet for miles until he reached the upscale sports bar where they always hung out. Looking absolutely pathetic, he pushed through the doors. Several of his friends were sitting in a VIP booth. "Ethan, what the hell happened to you?" one of them asked, completely shocked by his disgusting appearance. Ethan desperately told them a twisted, fake version of the story. "I got set up, man. The IRS illegally froze all my accounts. Just spot me some cash, please." The friend's concerned face instantly morphed into a mask of pure, freezing rejection. "Sorry, Ethan. The news already blew up in the corporate group chats. You got fired for cause today, didn't you? And AC Enterprises hostily repossessed your entire estate." Ethan froze like a deer in headlights. "How do you guys know about that?" "Literally everyone on LaSalle Street knows. You messed with AC Enterprises. Are you insane?" "Sorry, man. I absolutely cannot help you. I refuse to get blacklisted by Ace." The friend turned his back and quickly walked away. The other guys in the booth aggressively pretended Ethan did not exist. Ethan stood entirely alone in the middle of the crowded bar. The bouncer quickly stepped up and roughly escorted him out the door. He was thrown back onto the dark street, utterly humiliated. He was now a total pariah. Nobody in the city would dare touch him for fear of Ava's massive corporate shadow. Night fell over the city. Ethan was starving. He curled up into a tight ball on the concrete in front of a closed bodega, using his arms as a pathetic pillow, shivering violently as the night air turned cold. The annoying buzz of city mosquitoes and the horrible stench of the subway grates were his only companions. This was his brutal, instantaneous karma. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Isabella was having a massive panic attack. She had successfully escaped Ethan's sinking ship with 2 massive suitcases stuffed with designer clothes and bags. She temporarily rented a cheap, run-down motel room in a bad part of town. She desperately started calling other wealthy men from her extensive contact list. She needed to lock down a new sugar daddy immediately. "Hello, Mr. Vance. It is Isabella. Are you busy tonight? Let us grab dinner at Alinea," she purred into the phone, using her best seductive voice. "Isabella? Which Isabella?" the older man asked. "Oh, come on. It is Isabella. We met at the Chicago Yacht Club party." "Ah, Isabella. Ethan's broke girlfriend." "Yeah," the man's tone shifted instantly to pure ice. "Look, I am incredibly busy. Do not ever call this number again." The call abruptly ended. Isabella sat frozen on the cheap motel bed. She frantically tried calling another wealthy executive. The exact same brutal rejection happened. The shocking news of Ethan's catastrophic financial ruin had spread through the elite circles like wildfire, and Isabella's name had been violently dragged through the mud with him. She was the gold digger who was standing right next to the guy when his house was seized. She was toxic goods. Her carefully crafted reputation in high society was completely annihilated. No wealthy man would dare risk being seen with her. Unfortunately for Isabella, her nightmare was just beginning. While she sat crying over her ruined life in the filthy motel room, someone pounded heavily on the door. She opened it to find 2 men in sharp suits standing there. "Miss Isabella, we represent the law firm of Miller and Reed LLP. You are being formally served." The process server handed her a thick legal document. Isabella's heart stopped completely. She took the papers with violently shaking hands. Ava was officially suing her. The severe civil charges included alienation of affection, massive defamation, and intentional destruction of highly expensive private property. Ava was aggressively demanding $1 million in total damages. $1 million. Isabella screamed hysterically. I do not have that kind of money. Every single designer bag and expensive dress she owned had been bought with Ethan's money, which technically belonged to AC Enterprises anyway. The following weeks were an inescapable, living hell for the two villains. Isabella was completely broke. She could not afford a cheap public defender, let alone a corporate lawyer. She was forced to pawn her designer bags, one by one, for pennies on the dollar just to afford cheap ramen and her weekly motel rent. Ethan, after 3 days of starving and sleeping in filthy subway stations, finally completely swallowed his arrogant pride. He had to eat, or he would die. He dragged himself to the massive wholesale produce market south of the city, where the day laborers gathered. His face, which used to be flawlessly groomed, was now covered in street dirt. He had grown a thick, disgusting, unkempt beard. Sir, do you need some extra hands? He desperately asked, a rough-looking warehouse foreman. The foreman looked Ethan up and down with intense skepticism. You look a little soft. Can you haul 50-pound sacks of potatoes? I am strong, sir. I really need to eat. Ethan pleaded, his voice cracking pathetically. Start moving those heavy sacks from that pallet over to the delivery truck. I will pay you pennies per sack, the foreman grunted. And so began Ethan's miserable new existence. The arrogant executive who once wore custom-tailored suits and drove a massive Porsche now sweat like a pig under the blazing sun, breaking his back hauling heavy sacks of produce. His body, which used to be fit from expensive gym memberships, was now emaciated and broken. His skin was burned by the sun, covered in dirt and engine grease. His muscles bulged, not from vanity, but from agonizing, forced manual labor. His spine constantly ached, and his soft hands were now completely covered in bloody blisters and thick calluses. He had long forgotten what expensive cologne or clean laundry smelled like. He only knew the smell of his own filthy sweat, rotting garbage, and cheap cigarettes. What ultimately happened to Isabella? Ethan honestly no longer gave a damn. The last brutal rumor he heard from the other day laborers was that Isabella, after completely losing the massive $1 million lawsuit to Ava by default, had fallen into insurmountable, crushing debt. Desperate to survive, she had taken a job as a sketchy bottle girl at a deeply shady underground dive bar. Rumor had it she was arrested during a massive police raid just a few weeks ago. Her ultimate fate was far worse than simply being poor. She was totally destroyed. Ethan felt zero pity for her. He felt absolutely nothing. His soul was completely dead. He operated like a mindless machine. Haul heavy sacks, get handed a few crumpled bills, buy cheap street food, and pass out in a filthy alley. That was the endless, agonizing cycle of his new life. One late afternoon, after a grueling 12-hour shift of backbreaking labor, Ethan was handed his daily pay, exactly $55 in crumpled, dirty bills. He dragged his aching body out of the noisy market. He stopped at his usual cheap food spot, a classic Chicago-style hot dog stand on the corner, and bought a Vienna beef hot dog with all the fixings. Holding his cheap dinner, he walked over to a massive, busy intersection in the Loop. He sat down heavily on the filthy concrete curb, leaning his exhausted back against a metal traffic light pole. He was about to eat his only meal of the entire day. Directly across the busy avenue, a massive, multi-story digital billboard mounted on a towering skyscraper suddenly flashed to life. It was broadcasting a live feed from a major financial news network, like CNBC. Ethan froze. He stopped bringing the hot dog to his mouth. It hovered in midair. Plastered across that massive, towering screen was Ava's face. It was a live, global broadcast covering the massive international launch event of AC Enterprises that very morning. Ava's flawless, incredibly powerful, and highly dignified face literally towered dozens of feet over the city street. A famous financial anchor asked a question that echoed loudly from the screen speakers. Chairwoman Ava, you are currently ranked as one of the wealthiest, most influential corporate titans in America today. What is the absolute secret to your massive, unstoppable success? Ethan completely stopped breathing. He watched Ava offer a very slight, highly confident smile on the massive screen. There is absolutely no secret formula, Ava replied. Her powerful voice echoed loudly across the entire chaotic intersection, cutting through the city noise. I simply refused to ever stop grinding. I never stopped believing in my own sheer brilliance, even when the person supposedly closest to me ruthlessly underestimated me and called me completely useless. The cheap paper plate slipped from Ethan's trembling hands. The hot dog and all its toppings spilled violently onto the filthy, trash-covered sidewalk. But Ethan did not even flinch. His dead eyes remained completely locked onto the towering digital billboard. High up in the sky, looking down like an untouchable god, the woman he had aggressively called a sick, broke little nobody was being globally interviewed as a multi-billion-dollar corporate queen. And down here in the gutter, sitting on the filthy asphalt, the man who had arrogantly called himself a king was sitting like a pathetic beggar, staring blankly at his ruined dinner mixed with the city dirt. Ethan slowly lowered his heavy head. He did not cry. He just laughed. It was a dry, broken, completely insane laugh full of absolute, crushing despair. He had lost everything. He had not just lost his money, he had not just lost his corporate status, he had lost his entire universe. The woman he had violently thrown away now owned the entire world, and he had absolutely nothing. Not even enough remaining pride to scrape his spilled dinner off the filthy sidewalk. Karma had executed its mission flawlessly.